The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Cause there's something inside so strong. I know that I can make it, though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. My voice, the louder I will sing. You hide behind walls of Jericho. Our lies will come tumbling. Deny my place and time. You squander wealth that's mine. My light so brightly it will blind you, 'cause there's something inside.
Good morning, greetings, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. Welcome to Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Kelvin Sauls. It is indeed a joy for me, beloved, to have you with me this day. This is the day that the Lord has made, and we have no choice but to rejoice. Despite all the challenges we're going through, our rejoicing is part of our connection with the divine, our Creator. And so that joy that God, the divine, has given you, the world didn't give it to you, and the world, sure enough, can't take it away from you. And so it is with those words that I greet you, beloved, and welcome you this day to Faith Without Borders. As you know, here at Faith Without Borders, our mission is to engage in the education and mobilization of multiracial and multireligious transnational movements for social equity and planetary justice globally. That means locally here in Los Angeles, regionally in California, nationally in the United States, and globally around the world in general, but in particularly for me, Southern Africa. So it is a joy for me to have you here. Today we're going to check in on a very, very critical and important health issue that we need to be aware of. We know that health has been at the forefront because of the pandemic that we are experiencing and how it has revealed health inequities and continue to show us the health disparities in our communities, especially our African American communities, our Latinx communities, etc. And last week, of course, due to the unexpected and untimely transition of Chadwick Boseman, we wanted to pick up this conversation around health in general, but in particularly, around colorectal cancer. That is the cancer that he was afflicted with, that he succumbed to physically, but we know that spiritually he will always be with us because of who he was, in terms of his character and his integrity, the gift that he shared with us. But also he'll be with us in perpetuity because of the roles that he chose to play. He chose to play some iconic, significant roles, as part of, his acting career. And I had the privilege of watching most of them, if not all of them. We all, of course, know him as King T'Challa in Black Panther. That movie is very, very powerful, and again, it sparked just a cultural renaissance, not just for African Americans, but for Africans, in the diaspora, as well as continental, Africans, because my family in South Africa had an awesome time, powerful time watching the movie that is a reflection, in so many ways, of South African culture and a lot of, African culture. So we say, of course, Wakanda forever. But also Chadwick, played Thurgood Marshall. He played Jackie Robinson. And these just iconic figures, as part of our ancestral cloud of witnesses, in the sports world as well as, legally. So he has just done some significant work. And as we celebrated him, it was just very, very painful to realize that when he did a video to support our frontline workers, our essential workers, as the pandemic, was making its way in and through our communities, he received a lot of criticism, a lot of, painful comments because, of his appearance. And that, of course, revealed, even though we didn't know that he was afflicted and challenged by, colorectal cancer, just the stigma, after we revealed, and how our society is just so fixated and addicted to appearance, not knowing that, it is our character, it is the spirit that lives within us. Our physical nature, who we are physically, is just a host of that divine spirit that resides in each one of us. And so, we would want to have that conversation, and I'm so glad this morning to be able to have that conversation and to welcome to Faith Without Borders, one who is at the forefront of this, a colorectal challenge in so many ways. It is a joy for me to welcome Dr. Zuri Murrell. He is a leading Los Angeles colorectal surgeon and specialist. Dr. Murrell currently serves as the chairman of the Samuel O. Chin Comprehensive Cancer Institute and physician member on the board of directors of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center here in Los Angeles. I met Dr. Zuri, as I call him, when I was the senior pastor at Homer United Methodist Church. And for me, faith and health are two sides of the same coin, because our health is our wealth, and as a result of that, vital faith goes together with living a vital and healthy life. And so Dr. Zuri was part of the team that we had annually to come to Homer United Methodist Church to talk with us and to work with us on health challenges in general, health education in general, but in particularly around colorectal cancer. So welcome, Dr. Zuri. If you are there.
How are you, sir?
It's good to have you. Good
Pastor Sauls, good to see you.
Yes, thank you. I know you are on call, and I just appreciate you so much, my brother.
No, of course, it's great to see you again, and thank you so much for helping, bring this topic to light, especially in our community. I've been working with you for years now, and I can't believe it's been a while since I've seen you. So it looks like you're doing well, and I'm very happy that you're continuing to preach your message. I think what's really interesting about all of this, especially colorectal cancer as a whole, is that, it's the number 2 cause of cancer-related death in America when you look at men and women combined. It's the third most common cancer. So if you look at a man, the number 1 common cause of cancer in this country is lung cancer from smoking, and then it's prostate cancer, and then it's colorectal cancer.
Mm.
For women, it's lung cancer, and then breast cancer, and then colorectal cancer. But in terms of death, the second most common cause of cancer-related deaths in America is colon cancer. And as I told you a few years ago, it doesn't have to be. You know, colorectal cancer is the most curable when detected early, and the only one that you really can have an active role in not getting. Yet we still have so many people that die from this disease. And what's scary is we're seeing an increase, a 12-fold increase in people younger than the age of 45. And so that is something that we really have to pay attention to. And there's many reasons for that, which I know we'll discuss. But it's important to know that the knowledge in terms of treating this disease and in terms of diagnosing this disease and preventing this disease is with your parishioners. It's something that we can all have an active role in. People always say, how is that possible? Why are there so many colorectal cancer related deaths in this country? Well, there's a multitude of reasons, but number one is really what we put in our mouths. That is something that is so important. And what I use to illustrate this, Pastor, is that if you look at African Americans, we have the highest rate of colorectal cancer in the world. I do medical missions to Uganda, and let me tell you, you know what I don't operate on in Uganda? Colon cancer, because there almost isn't any. In Nigeria and Uganda, there's hardly any colon cancer, yet I'm telling you that African Americans, and there's hardly any genes that actually separate African Americans and even Caucasians, let alone African Americans and Africans, okay? Yet, we get colorectal cancer at an alarming rate, and they almost don't get it over there. So what's the main difference? The main difference is twofold. Number one is diet. You know, everything in Uganda, I love to say, is we call it trendy here, farm to table, but everything there really is farm to table. You know, when I'm there, I barely eat any red meat, and because they don't, you know, because that diet is not heavy in red meat, and it's a lot of poja, which is a lot of like beans and a lot of rice and a lot of vegetables, and it's a really high fiber diet. So that's number one. So the way that we break down animal proteins and animal fats in our body, we break it down into something called a procarcinogen. That means something that if you eat enough of and it lays around in your body long enough, that can turn into cancer, procarcinogen. And so what are procarcinogens? Processed food, bacon, red meat, such as, you know, beef, lamb, things of that nature. And I hate to tell you, even pork is actually not the other white meat, is actually considered a red meat also. So these kind of meats, and the way we break it down, and if we eat a diet high in that can cause and help contribute to cancer. Now, the other major difference in these other countries is there's hardly any obesity. It's still a lot of physical activity, a lot of that kind of work, and there's really not a lot of obesity there. So those are the two things that we can do in this country to help minimize our risk for colon cancer. But the key is this: me telling someone about the diet now, who's an adult, won't have as much impact as that adult who's listening, going and making sure that they feed their family members, whether it's their grandchildren, whether it's their children, healthy breakfast, and start to transmit their healthy lifestyle knowledge to kids. You know, we need about 20 to 25 grams of fiber a day. Okay. Fiber, what fiber does is help to basically escort waste through our body and out into the toilet. Okay. So it decreases something called our colonic transit time. The reason that's important is because anytime we eat anything, there's still waste and there's some procarcinogens there. And by the time it gets to your colon, you want it to be out of your body as quickly as possible. And you know, Dr. Sauls, or Pastor Sauls, I'm sorry, I like to start at the beginning, and I want to tell everybody I want to ask them, what is the colon and the rectum for? Okay. Now, usually when I ask this question, I think last time when I was at home and I asked this question, you know, people raise their hand and they always say to make poop. That's what they say, to make poop. But actually, that's not the purpose of the colon. Okay, so when we eat food, and this is important, I think that we all understand this. When you eat food, you place it in your mouth, you start chewing it, which is what we call mastication. Right. So as you chew it, you're breaking it down, you swallow it, it goes down to your esophagus, and then it goes into your stomach. And the stomach's stomach is full of acid. It helps to break down the food. You're still not absorbing hardly any food there. You're breaking it down into micronutrients. That then goes into your small intestine. The small intestine is where about 95% of absorption occurs, okay? So that's when we absorb everything. And by the time things get to the colon, that is pretty much waste. The colon's number one job is to reabsorb water from the colon so that the body has enough water to live. And the rectum's job is to hold stool until a socially appropriate time to empty. Okay, that's the point. So the fiber helps to speed up that transit time, the time from when waste gets to your colon to the time it's out of your body. Okay, so that's why a high fiber diet and lots of water are very important for having soft, easy bowel movements, but also the real importance is eliminating waste as quickly as possible. And so high fiber diets and preventing obesity are two major ways that we can decrease our chances of colorectal cancer. Now, about 8% of colorectal cancer is hereditary. And so this goes into what we always talk about, Pastor Sauls, about being your own healthcare advocate. As a patient, I know it's hard right now. It's hard to see doctors sometimes. And I'll be honest, as a physician, the reason it's hard for a lot of physicians is that sometimes we're stuck in health systems where you have to see X number of patients in an hour. You're just going. And so you love what we refer to as good patients. Now, for so long, African Americans, us, we've been too good of patient. What do we think of as doctors sometimes when we say good patient? You sit down, you listen, you just do what we say, and you leave. Okay? And I'm telling you that is, that could be a good patient to us, but that is not being a good patient to yourself. Okay? Whenever you go to a doctor's appointment, you should know what you want to get out of that appointment. You should know a little bit of background. If you know you have diabetes, if you know you have high blood pressure, you want to make sure that you talk to the doctor and make sure that is under control. And if it's not under control, you ask the doctor, you sit down, you pull out your sheet of paper with questions on it, and you ask the doctor, well, if this doesn't get better, what's our next step? When I first joined and started working at Cedars-Sinai, it was very interesting because I would have a lot of younger patients, and they were different ethnicities, different religions, and they would sit down with me and have a ton of questions. And at first, because that wasn't even my cultural experience, because I never really asked the doctor questions, I just sit and listen. I thought maybe it's because they thought I looked young or was I black, and they didn't really trust me. But that culturally, they ask a lot of questions. My African American patients, a lot of times I can say anything, and they'll say okay and do it, and that happens with others. That happens when they have other doctors too. And so the key is to ask questions and to know that we're in this together. You need to be a healthcare advocate. It's my problem if I don't have enough time to sit and talk and all that. That's a me problem. That's not a you problem. You need to get what you need to get out of these appointments. And the reason that is so important to have that, relationship interaction with doctors brings me to the third thing that we can do to prevent colorectal cancer in this country, which is getting our colonoscopies in a timely fashion. Okay. So colonoscopies, if some of the audience don't know, that's when you basically, the day before, you clean yourself out of any waste. And then under anesthesia, you have a camera that's inserted in the rectum, and it goes all the way throughout the colon, and it looks for something called polyps. So what's a polyp? A polyp is a small growth that all colorectal cancer starts as these little polyps. And you're able to see the polyp during the colonoscopy, and you're able to take it out during the colonoscopy, thus preventing colorectal cancer. The reason this is important brings us back around to what you said up front about healthcare disparities. So for a multitude of reasons, African Americans are offered colonoscopies less than other people. And when you look at data, it says that we refuse them more than other people. We don't want them. Nobody really wants anybody sticking instruments in their anus, okay? But the key is that's what we need. And that comes to being comfortable with your doctor. I don't care if I have a black patient, Asian patient, Caucasian patient. When it's time, and I say it's time for your colonoscopy, a lot of times my black patients and a lot of other patients, Latino, even Caucasians are like, Doc, I don't want anybody sticking things in my butt. Well, of course not. I know you don't. But if I'm telling you that this will save your life, then what? A lot of patients will tell me when I say this, well, Doc, I don't really care. I lived a good life. And I say, well, what about your wife? And they'll say, well, she'll be all right without me. And then the way I get people, I say, what about your kids? And they say, what do you mean? I say, you getting a colonoscopy not only affects you in terms of if we see polyps, we take it out, but then you take that information, you take it to your children, and your children will know this, and maybe they'll need a colonoscopy sooner. They'll know their history, they'll be their own healthcare advocate, and they'll get their colonoscopy sooner. And the way I really hammer that point home is I talk about my personal story. Is my dad, and I think I told you the story before, Pastor Sauls, but my father, typical man, my dad's highly educated, intelligent man, but Same thing. I don't want anybody sticking any tubes in my butt.
Right.
I say, Dad, you really need to get your colonoscopy. So he goes to the health system that will remain nameless. That's pretty big in California, but sometimes you have to stay on them. But I won't mention the name. And they told my dad at age 50. I said, Dad, go get a colonoscopy. So he comes back home that night, and he's walking funny. He's like, I can't believe you do this for a living. This is so painful. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, I had that colonoscopy you wanted. I said, Dad, did you drive yourself home? He's like, yes. I said, you did not have a colonoscopy. You had something called a flexible sigmoidoscope. Now, this test in this day and age, to me, is one of the biggest reasons people don't get colonoscopy. So back in the day, it was a good test because any doctor could do it. And it's basically you put a scope in the anus, but you're not under anesthesia. And it looks at the lower third of your colon, okay? Now, this is problematic for two reasons. Number one is 50, 60 years ago, you would be able to get a lot of polyps in that lower third, and that's where a lot of colon cancer comes from. Well, guess what? In African Americans especially, but now we're seeing in other races, a lot of our polyps are on the right side of the colon. You can only get there with a colonoscopy. So you not getting a colonoscopy, a full colonoscopy, especially for African Americans, does not do you a good service because a lot of our polyps and thus a lot of our cancers can be on that right part of the colon. And so a colonoscopy is the only way to see that.
Yeah.
So I had to call that health system, basically yell at them for not doing the right test, which is a colonoscopy on my father. And this is when my father was 51. And back then the guidelines used to be at age 50. So they were already late. And so after I got him to get his colonoscopy, drove him there, picked him up, he actually had 5 polyps that were further away than the edge of where that flexible sigmoidoscope went. Now, I use this for my own personal gain. I'm not going to lie, because I kept telling my dad for years, I said, hey, man, I saved your life. I saved your life, Dad. You owe me. I saved your life. We would joke about that. Well, I am turning 46 this year. When I was 42, because I knew my family history, my dad had 5 polyps. Subsequent colonoscopies, by the way, he would have 2 polyps, 3 polyps. So we had over a total of 10 polyps by the time I was 42. Now, I worked with the American Cancer Society, and the American Cancer Society is amazing, and they reduced the guidelines for colonoscopies initially for African Americans to age 45,
right,
and now it's for all people to age 45, okay? I got mine at 42 because I knew my family history. And lo and behold, I'm not obese, I work out, I eat right. However, I still had a pretty large polyp, not a cancer, a polyp on the right side. They were able to take that out with a colonoscopy. And guess what? It would have been a cancer if I would have waited till 45 when I would have been screening age. I say all this to say, because I knew my family history, I was able to get a test that saved my life sooner than if I did not. And I knew to do that. And all of these things are important because being your own healthcare advocate encompasses everything of what I just said. It is doing what you can do on your personal level, eating right, exercising, doing those things to help mitigate your risk, knowing your family history, making sure that you know when your parents had X, Y, and Z, because that allowed me to get my test sooner, which thus saved my life. And now, as you know, my daughters, I have a 13-year-old and 11-year-old, and they get so tired of hearing me talk about polyps and when they're getting their first colonoscopy. But they know they're getting their first colonoscopy at about 39 to 40. Right. They know that already. Okay, that's done. And they know this at such a young age. And so, Pastor, the reason I went into this field is because when discovered, number one is when discovered early, I'm a surgeon and I love to help people. When discovered early, this through surgery is totally curable. This cancer is. However, something better is, what if you don't have to get it? What if you never got it? What if we were able to do colonoscopies in everybody who was like younger than 40, I mean, there's a lot of different, that's hard to do because in California, you could probably get away with it because there's so many people like me, but in Georgia, Mississippi, and all these places in the South, they don't have as many doctors. So you can't have screening guidelines that you can't, in this country, you cannot have screening guidelines that you can't achieve, okay? However, what's important to know is you get a colonoscopy, a screening means you have no symptoms and no family history, okay? If you have any symptoms, what are symptoms? If you have blood mixed in your stool, that's an automatic colonoscopy. I don't care how old you are. Now, if you have some bright red blood for rectum, some changes in bowel habits, and these lasts about a month, you see a doctor, they're not getting better over another month, then you need to see a specialist like me. Okay. You have to be your healthcare advocate, meaning that you try to treat your symptoms. You try to find out what you can about your symptoms. They don't get better with over-the-counter remedies. You see your doctor. They don't get better. You insist on seeing a specialist.
Right.
That is the key. And also something else that I think is truly underrated, I alluded to it earlier, is that you have to be comfortable with your primary care doctor. Most surgeons aren't like me. I love to talk, obviously, and I like to interact with people, but most surgeons are just, technicians. And that's fine for most surgeons. Your family medicine doctor needs to be somebody who you have such a good relationship with that doctor can tell you the truth and that you're willing to hear it. Meaning that if you go in and the doctor says it's time for your colonoscopy, and you say, I don't want anybody sticking things in my butt, and the doctor goes, all right, never mind, we could do this Cologuard or this other test that could just look for blood in the stool. That's another reason why a lot of us are getting colon cancer too. It's because of that relationship. If a patient comes to me and I say, oh, you got to get your colonoscopy, they're like, Doc, I don't want anybody doing that. I give you that whole speech I just gave, Pastor Sauls.
Yeah.
Because sometimes a doctor's number one goal is sometimes to give you what you need, not what you want. And everybody needs this particular test because it could save your life. And more importantly, it could save your kid's life and it could save your generation's life.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're so right in terms of just having a disposition of proaction and prevention. And then part of that, I mean, as I hear you, say, is just this, essential, honest, and open partnership with your physician, and the importance of preparation when you do go, to your physician. And so that's just critical. I wonder, because I know you're on the call, I don't know how long we're going to have you, but whenever we would have our health events, we would talk about stigma, and especially for men, now let me just say, I've had my, colonoscopy about 12 months ago, right. And while I was at home, and I made a covenant, with some of the men there that whenever you go and get, your screening, that we will accompany you, we will drive you, and care for you, while you're there, so you don't feel like you're by yourself. And even though, I left Holman, I, still had that covenant with those two brothers. And so the minute I got my appointment, I called them, awesome. and I was accompanied by two of them, Freddie and Alonzo, and they came and picked me up, and they were with me the entire time, drove me back, and we, finished up our time together with lunch, and just an awesome conversation of brotherhood and how we ought to support one another around, our health. So this is possible, this is so critical, for us. And we see a lot of ads, of, how to just have a quick test and all of that. And I'm glad you clarified that up, that there's a difference between, getting your colonoscopy and I forgot the name of the other one.
Right. So it's a Cologuard and FIT test. Now those tests do have a purpose. So those tests are good at finding colon cancer. But the purpose of a colonoscopy, what I always tell people, a colonoscopy is not done to find cancer. It's done to prevent cancer. To prevent cancer. That's the difference, is that you can take out polyps before it becomes a cancer. Now the Cologuard test, I use those tests. If you've had 4 to 5 colonoscopies that are clear and you're about 80 years old, 75 years old, then we can have that discussion about a Cologuard, okay? But you're a young person, and young goes all the way up to 80, okay? And even, heck, my dad is probably going to be the youngest 80-year-old whenever he gets to 80, because he's 75 now, and he's probably younger than me in spirit. So age really isn't just a hard, fast number, but the key with those other tests is that they're good at finding cancer, which still has some value, because if you do it frequently enough, plus your colonoscopies, and you find a cancer early, then you'll be able to still cure a patient. But it does not they're not really good at finding polyps. So polyps are what is necessary to be removed so that you never get cancer. And so that's really the key. So, the issue is that, and a lot of us are going to start getting the fit tests and the Cologuard because what doctors will say sometimes, do you want a colonoscopy? They'll tell you about it and you say no. And then they'll say, okay, well, this is it because this is still under a guideline. It's still okay. But I am here to tell you and everyone listening to you that a colonoscopy is still the only way to actually prevent, the best chance of preventing cancer. Granted, colonoscopies do have a slight occasion, like a 6% miss rate where they can miss polyps, but if you get them frequently enough, that washes out, okay? Meaning that you will still, if you get them every 5 years, like we recommend colorectal surgeons every 5 years, if you have a polyp, it's every 3 years until you don't have a polyp, then that will mitigate your risk to the point where you should not ever have anybody getting colorectal cancer. And that's really the key. I mean, and when I say everybody, some people do have a heavy genetic predisposition. That's about 8% of colon cancers. There's some people that we start doing scopes on at age 20. Mm-hmm. So it's who have these genetic predispositions. So all of these things are very important. The best thing that you can do, especially as a parent, and I'm going to tell you, it's hard right now. I have great daughters, and it's hard because everybody's bored. What do we do when we're bored? We eat. My kids, their secret pleasure with like a lot of kids are something I'd never buy them, but they still manage to get them every once in a while. Are those like fire hot Cheetos and those, all those garbage. If you ever think about it, Pastor, so what is a Cheeto, right? It's not a chip. If you think about what is a Cheeto, right? It's not a potato. It's not corn. I mean, it's like an amalgamation of processed foods, and that's something else that's very important.
Right. In
Africa, I've barely had any processed food. There's not lunch meat and all of these other things that are so critical. In this country, I love to say that it's embarrassing that we have a hunger problem here in this country because we have more food than we know what to do with. However, a lot of our food is garbage. Yeah. And we're all guilty of it. I mean, I'm not the guy that's going to say, "Oh, you're eating that burger today on a holiday," but I am the guy that says that I eat red meat maybe once every 2 months, and there's little changes, Pastor Saul, that you can make. If you eat red meat every single day, right, and you change it and you start eating it 3 times a week, that's even better than eating it every day.
Right.
The hard part is when I was a kid, it was actually cheaper to cook food at home than it was to buy it. Mm-hmm. But now it really is cheaper to go buy, a fast food, a burger or something like that, and you'll feel fuller, but that's garbage, and it's hard. It's hard for me to tell a family, your kid wants French fries and burgers, and it's actually cheaper to do that than to go and cook a meal, and you're tired from work and all those things. It is really difficult.
Yeah.
But you kind of have to think about it as the habits that you're teaching your kids. And listen, I'm guilty of it too. My wife calls me grandpa because my daughters can get whatever they want. I bring them candy. Okay. I give them candy too much. Like once every couple of weeks or so, too much. And my wife has tried to fix that problem by making me take them to the dentist. And guess what? I'm giving them candy a little bit less than I used to give them candy. So we all. I'm not trying to say be holier than thou or anything. I'm just trying to elucidate this message, especially to our people, Pastor. Is that we got to do better. Yeah, we got to do better with the obesity situation.
Absolutely.
All of those things.
Absolutely, and it's not about being perfect; it's about being proactive.
Right.
And also,
yes,
you mentioned the 2 preventative pieces, which is diet, and physical exercise. When I went to my dentist, last year, I'm due again, to do my annual this year. We talked about your mouth being a very, very essential organ. And I never thought of my mouth as that until I realized that, really everything major, significant that enters your body goes through your mouth. And I think many, many times we take our mouths for granted,
Yes.
And so this dentist said, so you need to understand why it's important that you come see me, because of that, and now you've mentioned, the whole piece about how we, take our food, eat through our mouths, and we are certainly the ones that can control that. And the same piece around, physical exercise as preventative, strategies. Dr. Zuri, as always, you're not just inspirational, you are instructional. As always, I appreciate your, compassion and your companionship, with me and so many others, during this time. And we want to just encourage folk to see how we can, end the disease of stigma, and to see how we can truly just embrace opportunities, to be well, become well, and stay well, because your health is your wealth, and for too long have we squandered, our wealth because we are not, taking care of our health. Glad that you're on the front lines, and thanks so much again for taking time out of your busy schedule, being on call, and all of that. We're going to do this again,
Pastor, please,
as we continue
I hope so.
to do this.
And I'm always there for you, and I really appreciate, all you do, even from when I first met you, and how uplifting, your message is, really. And one other thing I just want to say is that it's obvious, and I hope I don't put you in a bad situation, but politically right now, if it's not obvious to all of us listening, we have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. And that starts with what's in our minds, our hearts, what we put in our mouth, you guys, is that nobody cares about us. It's obvious now. I mean, we already knew that, but now we see it. We have to care. God cares about us.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have to also look out for each other. We have to support each other. When somebody's getting the colonoscopy, that's one of the best things I ever heard. I do colonoscopy parties where basically it's friends and everybody who gets together to do that, because we have to support each other in our health, and even in wealth, and in our emotionally, socially, everything. So God bless. Thank you so much, Pastor.
Thanks so much. Blessings to you and your family. Much love. Keep on keeping on. And you are certainly moving us as individuals and our community from health prosperity to health vitality, and we appreciate that. Dr. Zuri Murrell, thank you so much. That was just so powerful. Again, we are here, because of the life and the legacy of Chadwick Boseman, and we want to just share a few images about him, but also, share a message that he has for us, especially during these consequential times, these tumultuous times that we find ourselves in. Let us, hear, this message from, Chadwick, who now speaks to us, as one of our most recent ancestors. He speaks to us from that ancestral cloud of witness for such a time as this. Listen to what he has to say.
Anything else you want to say from your heart?
All of that 70 million group of young people who will come out and vote. I believe in you. I think you can turn our nation around. You can make it live up to what it's supposed to do. It's not just that you're the future. You're actually the present. You're actually what we're supposed to be at this moment. And the fact that you have a voice, the fact that you can have a say, you vote for whoever you want for, vote for what you believe in. But I believe that the majority of you can see what's actually happening, and you want things to change. So I say all that to say, thank you in advance for your input and the victory that is to come.